Jeff and Scott and I are here to talk about a possible acquisition in Port Hope, Ontario, by Scott for housing. Loyalist College has announced, I think fairly recently, Scott, that they're going to expand their campus to Port Hope, right?
Correct.
And Loyalist is a tenant of mine in Belleville, a very good tenant. And we have some small studio apartments. We call them micro suites or studio apartments there. And as we were saying just before we recorded, we don't call it student housing because if you do call it student housing, it's hard to get insurance, and the insurance rates will be much higher. So it's just housing for young professionals. And I think if you were to acquire this site, which is a vacant parcel right now, there's no house on it, right?
Correct.
If you were to acquire it, the idea would be to build some housing for young professionals, right?
Right.
And do you know the zoning on this property? Have you checked that?
I have. Yeah. It's a Res 1-2.
What does that mean?
I actually looked it up today. The official plan, I actually downloaded it and looked at the definition for low density. I can't repeat it verbatim, but it's something like, depending on the lot size, two semis or a house with two ARUs or ADUs or whatever. There's a whole list of, depending on the size of the lot, a whole list of options.
Okay, so one of the things that I do as part of the process, and you should do this, I think, too, both of you, Scott, and you, Jeff, both as an investor and as a realtor, is you want to talk with your clients about what is the highest and best use for a property, right? So just before we got going here, at least I thought I had. Yeah, let's see if I can find it. Um, so I wanted to start with that, and I'm just trying to find the right one. Nope, not that one. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, okay. So we're going to start with that. I'll share my screen with you guys, and so I think I have the right property, Scott. Here, it's on the corner of Bruton.
That's it. Yeah.
Bruton and Victoria. And I just, using Google Maps, you can measure distance, right?
I didn't know that, but I do now.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just stop for a moment and just demonstrate, teach you guys something. Well, probably Jeff knew that anyway, but I'll just share the other screen for a moment and just show you, because it's very useful to do this. So this is just Google Maps here, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to right click here and it says measure distance. So I got a little dot there. I'll go here, I'll go down here, I'll go down over here, and I'll close the loop. And when I close the loop, it'll show me that the lot is about 10,000 square feet, and the perimeter is about 470 square feet, and that's about right. Okay, so that's how I did it. And if you want to clear it, you just go back here, clear measurement. So
Okay.
I actually did it on accurately here. So it's very simple to do. So Jeff, anytime you're looking at a property, it could be commercial, industrial, doesn't matter. You can go on Google Maps and you can measure just about anything here. I was just dealing this morning with a client of mine in London, Ontario, who's bought this humongous building, and he's got an old industrial building that has a 38,000 square foot floor plate. He didn't know how big it was. We just went on Google Maps, got the aerial view, and we're able to do that. So whether it's residential or commercial, it's pretty handy. All right, enough of
Okay.
that. Sorry about that to go on and on. All right, so looking at this, um, can you describe for me what you're thinking of on this property? What the highest and best use is, Scott?
Well, that's a great question, Bruce. I honestly don't know. The lot is fairly narrow. It's 55 by
Yep,
168, I believe.
that's correct.
And um, I think I mentioned to you that the foundation of the house still exists.
Yeah,
You can't see it if you walk by at street level, but it's buried underneath.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned maybe there was some grandfathering with a few things. Not, I'm wondering about setbacks and that type of thing, but
So
I'm
let's
thinking,
let's deal with the grandfathering thing first.
yeah,
So something that you guys may or may not know. Well, I don't know. What would the development charges be on a new house in Port Hope? Do you know?
I don't.
Jeff, what would it be in Uxbridge?
You know what? Bruce, that's a great question. I don't have specifics on it.
What about in Peterborough? Do you know if you built a new house there, what it would be?
I
Well,
don't.
if you're sitting down, I'll tell you what it is in Ottawa. When you build a new house in Ottawa, I think you're paying close to $35,000 in development charges when you pick up your building permit. So that's not a building permit fee, that's a development charge fee. You guys know the difference, right? Scott?
Um, I could guess, but I'd rather you told me.
So a building permit is relatively cheap. A building permit, you're paying for some inspections and for the review of the plans and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So on a $500,000 project, maybe your building permit is $6,000 or $7,000. I don't know, something like that. But in Ottawa, there's a thing called development charges, and this exists across the province. So it's something that both of you should find out before you do any new development. It could be anywhere from 15,000 to, Ottawa's really high, 35,000. I think in Toronto it's even higher. So, and that's supposed to pay for offsite infrastructure. What it really does is it buys the mayor a nicer car.
Okay.
To make sure that they have nice pensions. I mean, it's complete BS, in my opinion. People would obviously disagree with me, people in government, but I've been around long enough. I've seen the development charges just become another tax.
Right.
All right, but it's a significant number in most jurisdictions. There's some small towns where development charges might only be $4,000 or $5,000 a unit, but I suspect in places like London, Ontario, which is quite a big city now, and the two towns where you guys are active, well, really three, including Peterborough, it will be quite significant. All right, so what I wanted you to know, and if you go to pick up your building permit here, Scott, they are going to say to you, oh yeah, there's a development charge. But there is something in the development charges in the Planning Act, which created the ability for towns and cities and townships and counties to levy these. There is something which grandfathers you. If there was a pre-existing house there, it's considered to have paid for the development charges for that property. So you should not be charged a development charge. And you're going to have to know that, because undoubtedly the people who issue the building permits are going to say, well, it's a new house, we're going to charge you a development charge. They don't know the Planning Act. The planners don't know the Planning Act. Trust me on that. Okay. If you ask three planners just about anywhere, certainly in Ottawa, and I bet you no different in Peterborough or Port Hope, three different planners, the same question, you'll get three different answers often, right? So I just wanted you to make sure you guys know that. You understand that, Jeff? If there was, when I heard from Scott, there was a pre-existing house, I wanted to mention that right away. Okay, so tell me again, Scott, just summarize for me one more time, if you don't mind, what the zoning bylaw allows for.
I'd have to bring up the official plan and read through it. Like I said, it's zoned Res 1-2,
Yep.
and based on the size of the lot, I think there are many different things you could do.
Right. So just maybe you summarized it better the first time. Did you say it allows two semis?
I thought that it said that. Yeah, two semis, ADUs, I think up to two ADUs,
Wow.
that type of thing. Garages.
So let's just fool around a little bit, okay?
Okay.
I'll grab do it in yellow. So in theory anyway, we're thinking that we might be allowed back-to-back semis. All right. So maybe we have something that looks like this. I'm just making it up, you know, I mean, you need an architect. Okay, but those could be back-to-back semis. And you notice that there's a lane back here, right, Scott?
That's one of the reasons I was interested in the lot.
It's fantastic. So back here, you could have, um, you know, what you could have here is, let's just go here. This could be, it could be a workshop, or it could be an ADU, right?
Right.
And it might even be possibly two ADUs, because I heard you say that, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we've got, that's a possibility back here. And here we have two back-to-back semis. All right, so that's a possible, not 32, two back-to-back semis. All right. So I mean that's a lot of building. I mean, when you look around, you know, most of these or some of these buildings have already taken advantage of the laneway. They've got probably garages back here. This looks like a workshop, but I could be wrong about that. It could be an ADU. That looks like an ADU possibly. So people have been taking advantage of the laneway in the past, right? But this would be quite a significant amount of development. If you could get that on this property and you bought it for somewhere between 250,000 to 300,000, that probably would be a pretty freaking great, you know, result.
Okay.
I mean, we'll have to do a spreadsheet to ascertain that, but it looks like, I mean, if that was possible. So let's just look at a couple other things while we're here. I wanted to show you, I want to show the other screen, something that one of my clients does in Ottawa with back-to-back semis, which is really quite remarkable. Look, can you see my screen here?
Yeah.
All right. So this is a young student of mine. His name's Salem MacDonald. And this lot, if you can believe it, is 57.22 feet wide. So just a little bit wider than yours. And I wanted to show you the yield he gets on it. He got not one, not two, but four back-to-back semis on here. Four.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
It's a fantastic result. And I'll show you how he did it. This is kind of an aerial view or an isometric view. I'll just make it a little bigger. Now he had a zoning that's R4, so it allowed him to do 4 units, right? You might not get that. But I wanted to show you what is possible. And I don't think this lot is as deep as the one that you have. But you can see that there's 1 unit here, 1 unit here, 1 unit here, and 1 unit there on 57-foot lot. And believe it or not, these are freehold. So
nice.
that's not a condo, that's freehold. And here's how we, this is just my sketches, okay? So here is the street, and the back lot here, okay, has a kind of as an L-shaped lot. It's got this little tiny neck, so it does have frontage on a road, okay? And then so you have 1 semi here. Obviously, it has road frontage here, the green. The one in back behind it has road frontage marked in red. And then you've got the brown one here and the orange one here. Can you see how that works?
Yeah.
And I wanted Salem to do exactly what you were talking about on this lot. I wanted him to put small ADUs in the back. All right. So I wanted him to improve his yield. And he said, Bruce, I'm good. I got, you know, he's buying these lots these days in Ottawa fairly cheap compared to what it was during the pandemic, right? It was very expensive during the pandemic, but prices have come down considerably in Ottawa. I don't know about Port Hope, but it's lower here. So I wanted to show you what other people are doing on these lots. So we're not going to actually design whatever it is today, But I
Yeah.
wanted to show you, what some of these possibilities are, and they're probably more and better than maybe even you thought.
Okay.
Right. And he has a very good relationship with the city of Ottawa and with the planners. They like his work. He's had many, 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 successes with the city, and he's got a lot of, awards. And you can see this is a lot. It's actual lot with freehold, and you can see how tiny the frontage is. Right. So this is lot 151. That's 149, 147, 153. There's 153, which is obviously very square. And then here's another one of those with the narrow neck on it. And then here's one as well. All right, so you kind of see what's possible. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you before we get on with the actual offer is, and I can't remember if I've been through this with both of you, probably have, but what students want today, as you know, are micro suites. They don't want, when I went to McGill University a long time ago, I had a roommate, and I was a young engineer or trying to become an engineer. I had 40 or 45 hours of classes and labs a week. He was in arts and had very few hours and spent most of his time drinking, smoking weed, and listening to Neil Diamond records. To this day, I hate Neil Diamond. And, there I would be, trying to get some sleep, and my roommate would be smoking weed, drinking, and listening to Neil Diamond. It was really awful. So today, students have more money than certainly we did back then in the 70s, and they don't want to share, right? So I don't know if I've shown you guys, both of you guys, this, but this is kind of what a student is looking for today, a micro suite.
Yeah, no, Bruce, I've read a few articles you've sent me, and you've sent me some sketches too of micro suites, I think nano suites, and
Yeah. And
yeah,
Jeff, I don't know if I've shown you this, but UBC is doing student housing, and
yeah,
their suites are so small, they call them nano suites. They're 140 square feet.
right, yeah,
All right. And I'll show you. So that's the little kitchen. There's the bed that turns into a desk. The desk turns into a bed. You get a better view of the kitchen and the bathroom here, and there's the floor plan. Something else, again, I think I showed you this, Scott, already, but I wanted to go back over it one more time, and that is that if you did get back-to-back semis, and you went after micro suites, you might end up doing something like what one of my clients did, Ali Alili. Just even at the lower level, he's putting 3 micro suites in the basement, right?
right, right.
You remember this plan? We went through it, I think.
Yeah, I do.
Jeff, I don't know if you've seen it.
I believe I've seen this one, yes.
Yeah. So in 2 back-to-back semis with maybe 1 or 2 ADUs, I don't know how many, micro suites you would get, but quite a few. All right. So I was very encouraged about a few things. Right now, I'm even more encouraged because the zoning seems to be pretty good. And Scott, if you could dig that up, after the call and send it to me and Jeff, that would help.
I've got it on my email now. I could send it right after.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to just show you one other thing. I don't know if you've pulled this yet, but I did, and I'm not sure if I got it right, but before you do any offers in Ontario, no, it's actually over here, sorry, the other screen, I apologize. Before you do any, put in any offers on property, you should pull title. Scott, have you seen Geo Warehouse reports before?
I haven't.
Jeff, you have, right?
Yes.
So there's a thing called Geo Warehouse. You can see it up here, which gives realtors and lawyers access to every land title in Ontario. So I did that. 161 Bruton Street, Port Hope, and there's the PIN number. PIN numbers are very important, right, Scott?
Correct.
Identify a property. So I pulled this, and I'll make sure I share it with you, Jeff, so you don't have to repeat it. So there's the PIN number, but what I wasn't sure about is land registry status. I don't know if you can read that here, but right here it says land registry status not active. So I am not sure if this title is the correct one. All right, I mean, it's what's in land titles, but if it's not an active title, it's probably because they did a severance sometime in the past. Which I think is correct.
Okay.
All right. And it looks like the owner's name is Nancy Catherine Mann. Does that ring a bell?
It does, yes.
All right. And there's the legal description. But Jeff, before we put in an offer, we have to check this. Right? Jeff, you're gonna have to call the realtor for the seller and make sure that we've got the right owner, the right property, the right PIN number, and the right legal description.
For sure. And then, I mean, we can have the conversation after this about, just with it being Port Hope and the soil conditions, we probably should look into that.
I didn't know that. What are the soils like?
I was representing buyers a couple years ago in Port Hope, and just with all the and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, the Port Hope initiative
Yeah.
and I guess in the past, this is what I know, you probably know way more than me, Scott, but I guess in the past, Port Hope was they were burying some radioactive material. And just the real estate deals that I have done around that area, a lot of them, we were asking for some sort of verification of soil conditions, especially in the downtown area.
Right. So, in the last few years, if I've purchased a property, there's been a clause basically saying like they can't say for certain if there are radioactive materials, soils on the site that you're purchasing. The cleanup is well underway, and to my knowledge, they've identified the properties within Port Hope that have contaminated soil, and they've begun the process of cleaning them up. I haven't seen anything related to this property.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good idea. So here's the property, Jeff, on the corner of, I guess, Victoria and Bruton, and there's the laneway. And if you pan out, which I'm doing now, you can see it's a fair ways from downtown, right? I guess. I mean, I would
Yep.
imagine this is downtown here, and there's the harbor, I suppose. So Scott, where would most of the contamination be?
It was scattered a little bit. So a good chunk of it was on Highland Drive, which is near a wooded area called Monkey Mountain.
Okay.
That's where a lot of the cleanup is currently. And the other area that has a lot of cleanup happening is just north of Cameco, which is right along Lake Ontario.
Okay. So
Can't.
this is showing Monkey Mountain, I don't know where, this is somewhere else.
Yeah,
Alberta.
no. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to this is obviously not right.
It's quite a distance from Bruton.
Okay, so you're saying that Monkey Mountain, wherever it is undergoing a cleanup. And what was the other part of Port Hope that's undergoing a cleanup?
Well, you can see on the map there where it says East-West Beach.
Yeah, right down here.
Okay, well, I think that is Cameco, which is a uranium producer.
Right.
And the lands to the north of it, to the immediate north, is where a lot of the cleanup's happening.
Okay, so I think that's very good advice there, Jeff. We should be careful. All right, so I'm going to go back to the other screen one more time. Sorry about going back and forth, guys, but we're getting through this. So, Jeff, I will share the Geo warehouse with you, but it looks to me like this transfer, well, it does say this transfer happened in December, so very recently. Nancy got it from Pengo Pally Holdings, and probably it was a severance, and it's transferred with another title. So there's a second pin here. So just when you're talking to the realtor, let's make sure we got the right property. Okay, enough. All right, let's go now to something else. So what we're going to work on for a few minutes here, guys, and then we're going to get off the call, is something, Scott, I call a deal points memo.
Yes.
And the reason you do something like this, especially for commercial property, which essentially what this is before you put in an offer, you just summarize for yourself as much as anybody else exactly what it is that you want to achieve. All right. And what I do, Jeff, with a lot of commercial realtors, maybe not in this case, maybe we just go to an agreement of purchase and sale and submit it and see what we get. Which is fine. But for larger deals, what I'm doing a lot of, Scott, right now, and I think, Jeff, you know this, so I do a deal points memo and I actually give it to the other realtor. And I say, look, we'll do an agreement of purchase and sale, but let's agree on the major points. What is the price? What are the conditions? Are there any terms? When are we closing, etc. So it just saves a tremendous amount of time. And I help clients do deals in Texas, in Florida, in Colorado, and Idaho, and other states, other provinces. So we use this an awful lot. And Jeff, especially if you have a sophisticated commercial realtor on the other side of the transaction. If it's a typical residential agent, if you gave them a deal points memo, they'd have no idea what to do with it. So you have to be the judge of that, okay? All right, whether it makes sense to show them the deal points memo or not, but we're going to do it anyway. All right, so the buyer, I think, is going to be Scott Davis.
Now, Bruce,
yeah.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Does it make more sense, just in terms of connecting with the seller, to always purchase it under your own name versus putting it under a corporation name?
So that is up to you to make that decision. So what I have done here, and what I typically do, is I put it in your name because it's just so simple to do, for a company to be incorporated with an assignment clause. Doesn't mean you have to assign it to a company. It just means you can.
Yeah.
And it depends on a whole lot of things. If you have a lot of cash, not you, anybody, if you have a lot of cash available, and you bought a property in your own name, like I own some properties with my children, right? I own a house, for example, that my daughter and her husband and her 2 children live in. I'm on title with Miriam, my daughter, Miriam, as joint tenants. And Scott, you know what joint tenants are, right?
No.
Okay, so there's two main different forms of direct ownership in your own name. One, let's say, Scott, you and I and Jeff bought an investment property together. We wanted to put it in our personal names, which we might do. It would be Bruce and Jeff and Scott on title as tenants in common, which means if I were to pass away, rather than you guys owning it, my 1/3 share would go to my estate.
Okay.
But there's a very interesting way of holding property if you have children. It is that they can go on title with you as tenants, as joint tenants, which means that if I, like on my daughter's house, and I had to go on title to help her with financing, right, so that she could qualify. So I'm a joint tenant on title on her house. She has a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, half double, and she has a lower level apartment. So it's pretty good. I mean, she can live there with her husband and her 2 kids and pay $700 a month after paying for everything, including her mortgage, because she has income coming in from the basement apartment. But anyway, I'm a joint tenant. So if I were to die, I'm simply eliminated from land titles and she would own 100% of it. Right? So it's a very effective way of passing on property in all the provinces of Canada, except for Quebec. Quebec has its own law, right? So if you wanted to hold this in your own name, that's fine. You can do that. If you wanted to add your kids or your wife or whatever as joint tenants, that's possible. Or if it's an investment property and it becomes too complicated to keep it in your own name, you might create a company and hold it that way, right? So, I mean, you're going to make that decision, but we can kick that ball down the road.
Sure.
Okay, and the seller, I think, I'll just take it from the geo, is and I'm gonna send you guys, both of you guys this, but first, foremost, we'll just finish it off. Now, the purchase price, I think you were thinking about offering 250, Scott.
That's what I mentioned to you. I don't know. Do you think that's reasonable, or do you think that would be insulting?
I think they're asking 325 now. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. What do you think, Jeff?
It's been on the market for, sorry, let me pull up the listing here.
I can tell you, it's been on the market for 122 days.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point.
Okay. So I'm gonna change it a little bit. Oops, I changed it. And I increased it a little bit. We can obviously change this, Scott. You're the decision maker, obviously not me. But I really like fives. Ever since Canada got rid of the penny, you know, when you see things in the store, it's no longer $9.99 or $19.99. It's $19.95 or $9.95. Same thing in real estate.
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah.
I think that probably now I wasn't sure about this. Is HST in addition to the purchase price? If it might be, and then it might not be. HST, again, if we were to call CRA right now and ask them, three guys, three people at CRA, we'd get three different answers. When you create a new lot, you know, let's say we put roads, water mains, and sewers in, and we created 50 new lots. We would sell it to end users, and HST would be applicable. If you have a lot of record, there is no HST. So I'm going to just say, in addition to purchase price, to be determined. All right. So we just don't know. And that's something that your lawyer is going to have to figure out, Scott.
Okay.
I'm not kidding, Jeff. It is so complicated now. I think we're dealing with a severed lot. It might be considered a lot of record, no HST. But Scott, are you aware? Sorry about it. It gets a little complicated. Are you aware that if you personally are registered for HST, or your company, if you formed a company to own this, is registered for HST before you close, and if it's determined that HST is in addition to the purchase price, you can get that back as an input tax credit if the units that you're going to build here, if they were either short-term rentals or medium-term rentals.
Okay. No, I didn't.
Right, let me explain that a little bit more. It's complicated. I have a building that I basically rebuilt from scratch, and spent, you know, about $5 million on it. And our units are either medium-term rentals or short-term rentals, which means we charge HST on the rent, right? So medium-term rental is typically, you know, 30 days to maybe 6 months. A short-term rental is less than 30 days. Long-term rental obviously would be a year or two. If it's a long-term rental, you don't charge HST, right? We just don't charge HST. In that case, if it's HST in addition, you don't get that back as an input tax credit. But if you intended to rent your units, you know, your young professionals on a medium-term basis, which you might do, you can rent them using what I call a guest agreement as opposed to a lease, and you're not subject to the Residential Tenancy Act. So in our building, for example, we have a number of 4-month and 6-month medium-term rental agreements, and they're actually, I call them guest agreements. And it's, for example, we've got a loyalist professor who is coming for one term. She needed a furnished place. We rented to her for 4 months. We charge her whatever the rent is plus HST. Which means on a $5 million renovation budget, 13% is what, $500,000 or $600,000 in input tax credits. I got most of that back.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, some of my units there, Scott, are long-term rentals. I've got some, and that portion of the building, I don't get the HST back.
Right.
Okay. So it's a little complicated. On the deposit, what kind of deposit were you thinking of?
Is 10,000 sufficient?
So I'm going to put in $7,500.
Okay.
Rather than 10, and I'll explain why again. change the color back to black. And because it's a residential transaction, we better put in 2 business days of execution of this agreement. Because residential realtors, Jeff, you know this, freak out if they don't get the deposit within like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
In commercial transactions, Scott, we tend to take a week to, you know, I deal with some commercial guys who are buying properties for 11 million bucks. It takes about a few days to get the deposit check out of a corporation, right?
Okay.
So, but the reason I go with smaller deposits, Scott, and again, Jeff would know this. Let's say, for example, you put down, say, $25,000 deposit here, okay? And something goes wrong in the transaction. The money, your money is say it was 25,000, is in the trust account for the selling realtor. No realtor can release monies from the trust account with both, unless both buyer and seller sign the termination and mutual release.
Right.
And I have had sellers acting extremely stupidly. I mean, you have some conditions, the conditions weren't fulfilled. Could I have my deposit back? They just say, no, F off. And you have to sue them to get your damn deposit back, because the broker of record is not allowed to release anything without mutual release and termination. It's incredibly stupid.
Okay.
So it doesn't happen that often, but it has happened to me and to my clients a few times. So if I could get away with it, my deposit would be a toonie.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay. So seller take back mortgage, you don't need that. So we're not going to put that in. I'm just going to strike through. All right, just get rid of that. When would you like to close, Scott?
I mean, we need enough time to obviously to do our due diligence, but the quicker
100%.
the closing, the better, probably from their perspective.
100%. So what if we were to put in, say, April 17th?
Sure.
I think that's fair, because if you were buying a house, we could do it faster. But you're buying a lot and you've got some pre-consultations to do and all kinds of other stuff. And then you've got your closing, your title search. And you know, there's a difference between title search date and closing, right?
Correct.
Your lawyer will do a title search. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the PIN, again, I'm going to put it in here from Geo. I'm not 100% sure I got it right, so I'm just going to put in the 2 PIN numbers. And Jeff, you'll figure that out. So we've got 2, and one of them obviously is the original property, and one is the severed property. So I got to go. And this, and I'll just put a bunch of question marks there. Okay, Jeff?
Yep.
And I'm just, so we have it, I'll grab my picture. And not that one. Sorry, guys. Oh, I had another thought too. I just wanted you to keep this in your back pocket for now, Scott. But
Okay.
I had another thought at some point that you might, you might consider at some point whether it makes sense to sever it again.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing.
All right, so that's a possibility. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
that you're going to do that, but so what we're creating here is a deal points memo, Jeff. That's only for us. You definitely aren't going to give this to the and I'm going to put the highest and best use one in there, because we're never giving this to anybody else. It just are us. I'll put this one in here too. No, that's not the one I wanted. Yeah, this is the one I wanted. So I'm just going to put these 2 in here. And you can see, Scott, how this thing here, this document could become like a really important working document for you.
Yes.
All right, so I'll just. All right, so we're just fooling around, so we might sever it, this is the kind of highest and best use, and I'll just put that down, highest and best use. You guys see me do this all the time, HABU, highest and best use. Okay, the legal description, again, I'll take it from the document that I have. And again, I have no idea if this is accurate, so we're gonna have to. I'll put it in here, Jeff, again, and I'll just put a bunch of question marks there. MPAC, we don't know what that is, but I'm sure we can figure it out at some point. Jeff, I think the commission is payable by the seller or seller's listing agent to your brokerage, which you'll split with my brokerage. I think it'll be 2.5% plus HST to the buyer agent, which will be you and me.
I believe it's 2%.
Oh, thanks. Just ruined my day. Representation for the buyer, Jeff Moody. You can put the rest of your details in here. And I guess I have, I have to be mentioned. No, I'm doing a referral, so I don't think I have to be mentioned. The representation for the seller, who's the agent?
Jennifer.
Jacqueline Pennington.
Jacqueline, sorry.
Yeah.
Jacqueline. How do you spell Pennington?
Pennington.
Yeah, I think I got it there. Realtor disclosures, none. MLS info available. Do you have a URL for it or an MLS number?
Yep, it's X.
Hang on a second, I've got a problem here. Okay. X
725
725
4520.
Are you aware, both of you, that it is more difficult to finance here? It's more difficult to finance property that has not been on MLS?
Really?
Yep. Do you know why?
The information's not there?
I think that's part of the reason. Mortgages are harder to come by for property that's sold privately because there's a lot of mortgage fraud. So let's say this was my property. I could say, hey, Scott, you buy it for $750,000. Put a mortgage in place for, $500,000. I'll keep 300,000, you keep 200,000, and we'll walk away. So you put it in a numbered company, you put a mortgage in place, you over leverage it, it's mortgage fraud. So the way to avoid that is if it's been on the market like this one has for 122 days, lenders look at that. All right. So if you're going to buy something that's a private sale, hopefully you're going to pay cash for it because it's going to be more difficult and more expensive. All right. Now we know that, Jesus, what's going on here? Okay, that's not working. I have to save this. I'm going to have to close it. Something's gone wrong with the document. I apologize. Over here, Scott. Let's see if hopefully it didn't screw up. No, and so the zoning is R12, right?
Correct.
R1-2, I think. Oops.
Mhm.
So Bruce, what does it
Yes.
say in your geo?
Hmm?
What zoning do you get when on your geo warehouse?
It didn't have the zoning here.
Yeah.
It did not have the zoning, and usually a geo does not show you that. The land area, we'll go back to here. Oops, I guess I deleted it. Okay. The lot we know is 55 by 168, right, guys?
Yeah.
We'll just put it in here. 55 feet by 168. Can you multiply those two numbers together for me, Jeff?
Sorry, 1 second. I was just looking at the
Yeah,
listing.
that's okay. What dimensions?
55 by 168.
Yeah, 55 by 168. That's a fantastic lot, I think. And you saw what, Scott, what you can do with 57 feet, right? So if you're clever like Salem is, and he's a hell of a developer, yeah. So what is the number?
9240.
9240 square feet. Part of the reason why, Scott, we do all this sort of quote unquote extra work is that this document becomes not only fundamental to the agreement of purchase and sale, it's something you can refer back to a few months from now or a few years from now, right?
Right.
It'll have a lot of pertinent information.
Okay.
Building areas, none. All right. Do we know what the property taxes are? It'll probably show on the listing.
Yeah, it's saying 2670 for 2023.
2670, 2023. Who is your lawyer, real estate lawyer, Scott?
Sorry, I've drawn a blank. I've used a few different ones in the past year. So, I guess I would put down Allison Lester.
Yeah. Jeff, do you have Scott's cell number? Scott,
No,
would
I
you
don't think so.
provide
Yeah.
his cell number?
Yeah, it's 905 269 7626.
And Jeff, would you provide yours to Scott, please?
Sure, I'll text you right now. How about
Okay,
that?
perfect. Thank you.
That's good, man. Smart. All right. Do you have a mortgage broker that you use, your go-to guy if you're going to do some financing?
Yeah, I use Streetwise. I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but financing parcels of property is usually very difficult, is it not? Like, I just anticipated having to pay cash.
So I think, if you wanted to put a mortgage in place, it's not that difficult to do, probably 50% loan to value.
Okay.
Scott, do you use Dahlia, or do you have somebody
Yes.
else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I know Dahlia, but there's a couple of girls in the office that I've dealt with for a couple of past purchases.
Excellent.
Okay.
I've used
So-
Dahlia in the past as well.
So
Yeah.
let's look at the conditions, guys. Financing and economic feasibility. Economic feasibility is important, Scott, not just financing, because we're going to do a spreadsheet, and at the end of the day, if it's not producing the cap rate that you're targeted, economic feasibility means, yes, I got financing for it, but no, it wasn't economically feasible, so I'm leaving the deal.
Okay.
They're different.
Yeah.
Examination of all deliveries, that's probably important. I think let's go to, we'll put an environmental, you know what a phase 1 environmental study is, right, Scott?
No?
Jeff? Yeah, so
Yeah.
a phase 1 study is, it may be required here, and it will cost you, as part of your conditions, it will cost you about $3,000 to do. You hire an environmental company. I typically use Pynchon. It's a national company. They're very good, and they're relatively quick, but it does take 3 weeks to get one. And what they do is they will give you a report, a phase 1 environmental report, which they will walk the site. They will look at the chain of title back over 100 years to see what's been going on. Maybe there was a dry cleaner here a long time ago, and they might have polluted it, an electrical store, a gas station, a uranium manufacturer. I mean, I don't know. So,
Yeah.
so they look at the chain of title, and they also look at aerial photos we have aerial photos for most of Canada going back more than 100 years. So what they do is they walk the property, they look at chain of title, they look at aerial photos, and then they tell you that there is, you've got a clean bill of health or you don't. Given what Jeff was saying earlier, and I did know about the cleanup, because you had mentioned it to me, Scott. That might be a requirement before you would do anything here. So it'll cost you $3,500, and it is part of due diligence. It might be $3,000. And it does take 3 weeks, a minimum of 3 weeks. So that's why you can't, it's not like buying a bungalow somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It's going to take more time. I do think you have to do zoning review and pre-consultation. You should talk to the people in Port Hope, and I'm going to put the soil tests right up there with the phase 1, because there is something called a phase 2, but you almost certainly are not going to do a phase 2 here. Let's say the phase 1 report comes back and says, look, there's real concerns here. That looks like there has been some past owners or some other kinds of events have taken place, and it's likely that your site is polluted. At that point, you're probably going to walk away. All right. I do some work for Canadian Tire. It's called CITRO, Canadian Tire Real Estate Organization, and we do land assemblies for Canadian Tire. And I've helped them buy sites that are heavily polluted, but they're not building residential, right? So the Ministry of Environment is a little bit more forgiving if a site is polluted, but you're just going to put a store on it. But if you're going to have people living there, especially children living there, and there's any sort of pollution, that's a problem.
Okay.
Right? So a phase 2 is when they bring, drill rigs on the site. They take water samples, they take soil samples, they go back to the lab. I mean, that's a $20,000 investment or more.
Okay.
Right. On one of the Canadian Tire sites, they had a rail siding, and they had been dumping coal and petroleum and all kinds of other things. You know, they just clean out for 100 years. They've been cleaning out the cars, the rail cars, and so the entire one side of the entire site was heavily polluted, but they got what's called a record of site condition, called a risk report or certificate from the Ministry of Environment, which said as long as you leave that pollution undisturbed and you don't mess around with it and you build over here, you can build your store.
Right.
But if Canadian Tire is never going to build any houses, obviously, but if Canadian Tire was going to build any sort of residential there, or you would never buy that site. You would never get permission to build. So the brownfield stuff that you and I've talked about before, Scott, is very, very, very difficult to do. All right, especially if you've got any kind of residential. I've got a client with a 10-acre site downtown London that is heavily polluted, and he can build commercial there, but he wants to also build 3 apartment towers. Right. We're in for a hell of a battle. All right. There's no building inspection needed here. I'll just strike through that. Legal review, we don't need that. Jeff knows what he's doing, and we don't need this. So we can take those conditions out. All right. The conditional date. We said the closing date would be sometime in April 17th. So the conditions would run to probably, let's see, February, March, probably go to, I don't know, it would go April 3rd. And that's it. We'll take out the rest. Almost done, guys. Thanks for being patient. Well, it's, we have to make sure that we're setting you up, Scott, and to some extent, Jeff, too, to expand your real estate portfolios. So we're working through something. The next time it'll be faster.
No, I find it very informative. It's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
We know it's going to be vacant possession. That'll just be a standard clause. There are no chattels. We don't need that. Fixtures excluded, none. Just strike through that. Now we're going to get to the deliveries. We want property taxes. We don't really need 2021, but property taxes for those 2 years and MPAC assessments. We need copies of letters, reports, designs, plans, and correspondence with any, because this will be the severance. So you'll get all the documentation, I think, with that. Do you understand that, Jeff? We're asking for everything that has to do with the creation of this lot. We need to see that. And they will have a survey of the subject property. I mean, you can't get a severance and you can't get into land titles without a survey, right? A property done Ontario Land Surveyor survey. We don't need the area certificates. We'll get that from the that. I don't know. Do you think they might have a phase one already? They might have done a phase one, Jeff? Is that a possibility for the seller to have done a phase one? Probably not, eh?
They might have something just because of the
Yeah.
initiative
Like
in the
The
area.
current owner lives beside the lot,
Yeah.
and she bought the house that was beside her and had it demolished. So I
Yeah.
don't know if she would have had to do that when they tore it down.
Probably not,
No?
but
Okay.
we can ask if they have it, if available, and if they have an appraisal, we'll get the copy of that too.
Okay.
This is important here. Seller hereby appoints buyer as agent for purposes of these investigations, applications, due diligence. As you know, Jeff, most realtors don't put this in the agreement of purchase and sale. They say to their buyer, don't worry about that. We'll get a letter from the seller after we do a deal. I think that's risky because I've had sellers say, no, I'm not giving you permission. So Scott, if you want to do a pre-consultation with the town of Port Hope,
Yeah.
you go in there and they say, well, you're not the owner. Jacqueline so-and-so or Jennifer so-and-so, whatever her name is, owns it. You don't own it. You don't have the right, and we can't disclose anything about this property to you. If it's in your agreement to purchase and sell that the seller has appointed you as their agent, right? For the purposes of this due diligence, you just show them, you don't show them the whole agreement. You just show them this section and say, look, no, I have permission. It's signed. Okay. So Jeff, don't leave that for later. Do it right in the agreement of purchase and sale. Because sellers will agree to anything now, but once you've signed and your deposit's in their trust account, they can say, no, well, I didn't agree to that. You understand, Scott?
Yes, I do.
Okay. In addition, seller agrees to allow buyer or buyer's agents to enter upon subject property for purposes of fulfilling conditions or making such investigations, provided buyer shall reinstate property close to prior condition. So if you did want to bring a backhoe on site, you could do that and do some testing if you wanted to. All right.
Okay.
That gives you that. And then I often put this in here because a lot of my clients are buying properties and they want to pre-market. That's not the case here. So I'm going to take that out. Again, you're allowed to market property. Let's say you were going to do a severance and sell the severed property and just keep one parcel, Scott. Then I would keep that in there.
Right.
Because then Jeff could actually put the proposed severed lot on MLS while we're in the conditional period and see if he can get a sale for you. Right? But
This is probably good too, Bruce, because Scott, did you say that the seller lives in the house beside?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so the next one's really important for exactly what Jeff said, Scott. Seller agrees not to oppose either directly or indirectly any zoning, site plan, building permit, or other municipal, provincial, or regulatory applications that the buyer may make with regards to the subject property. This warranty shall survive completion. If she doesn't agree to that, you can't buy it. Do you understand, Scott? Because maybe she'll look at your development plan and say, "Oh my God, he's going to build the Taj Mahal is going to build the Empire State Building next door to me. I don't want that." And then she gets her brother-in-law's best friend to oppose you.
Right.
Right. So she's not allowed to do that. Then here's the assignment clause. Buyer shall have, it doesn't mean you have to do it, buyer shall have a one-time right at any time prior to completion to assign this agreement to any person, persons, or corporation owned or controlled by the buyer, directly or indirectly, either existing or to be incorporated, and upon delivery to seller of notice of such assignment, together with the assignee's consent in favor of seller to be bound hereby as buyer herein before named, you, shall stand released from all further liability. We don't need this in there. Typically, if you're buying a building and there's some vacancy, that might be a good thing, Scott, in the sense that you might renovate a unit and lease it. You want to do your own leasing, right?
Yeah.
That's not relevant here. Let me see what we've got here. Adjustments, all property taxes and other adjustments shall be apportioned as of the day of closing. That is funny that you need that in there, Jeff. And I'll tell you another reason why. I bought a property, a power of sale, and a week before closing, the lawyer for the seller calls me up and says, oh, by the way, we're not paying the back property taxes. There's $65,000 in back property taxes. We're not paying that. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we're not. We're losing money on this. We're not paying them. And I said to him, well, I'll pay my share of the property taxes, but there were like 7 years of back property taxes or something like that. So are you following me, Scott? He wanted me to pay, like 7 years of arrears. And I said, check out the agreement. It says all property taxes and other adjustments are apportioned as of the date of closing. So I'm responsible. I think I closed in October. I'm responsible for like 2 months of property taxes or 3 months. You're responsible for 7 years.
Yeah.
And the lawyer said, well, we're not closing then. I said, well, hold on a second. Before you get off the line, let me tell you what's going to happen. We're going to serve you the documents. I'll put the money into my lawyer's trust account. He'll have the funds for you, and he'll have the documents. He'll serve you on the day of closing. If you refuse to close, we will pay the land transfer tax and we'll register our agreement, a purchase and sale on title. And you will never, ever, ever sell it to anybody but me. Whether it takes you a year or two to come around, you'll just have more back property taxes. But you are not welshing on this deal. That is ridiculous. I was pissed. And the lawyer said, well, I'll have to take that under advice. But he said, you do whatever you want. 10 days later, he closed.
Right.
And he paid the back property tax. It was stupid. But if I hadn't had that clause in there, I might not have got the deal. The buyer shall have the right to revisit the property a further, 3 times, just after waiver of fulfillment of conditions. So it just means you can walk the property and you don't need her permission. Environmental, I won't read this. It just seller represents and warrants to the best of her knowledge that she hasn't fucked up the property. She hasn't been, throwing her oil furnace residue on the property.
Right.
Warranties, we'll have to take this out. All right, and we're almost finished. Now,
I like the part, Bruce, speaking about opposing any future plans, because I don't know if you know the name David Blackwood, famous Canadian artist.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Anita, David passed away a little bit more than a year ago, maybe longer now, maybe close to 2 years. His wife, Anita Blackwood, lives directly across the street on Bruton, and she's I know Anita well. She's been part of the Port Hope Heritage Society for forever, but she would likely be interested in knowing what was going on and want to have input on it. So.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and unfortunately, the NIMBY problem is everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. When I wanted to build the Ottawa Palladium, now called Canadian Tire Center, I had a local farmer oppose the construction, and we went to the Ontario Municipal Board, and we had a 13.5-week hearing about whether the Palladium could go forward. And a local farmer by the name of Andy Terrodes opposed it, and he organized some people who were in opposition. That hearing cost my firm almost $3 million in legal and planning fees. All right. And what was really weird about the whole situation was 10 years after the arena opened, the CBC local news went back to interview Andy, and I thought it was strange that a farmer could spend 13.5 weeks during a summer coming to a hearing downtown Ottawa instead of attending his farm. Anyway, the CBC interviewed Mr. Terrodes on the 10th anniversary of the opening of the building and said, I remember the young reporter, she said to Mr. Terrodes, well, Mr. Terrodes, you were one of the chief opponents of the Palladium. How do you feel now that it's open and been, really basically a neighbor of yours for the last 10 years? Oh, he says, I was never an opponent. And you could see, because there were 2 cameras there, she went, what, like that. She thought her editor had sent her out in error. And he said, no, I went to the hearing just to make sure they went through the full process and they didn't take any shortcuts. And he said, no, the building's been great for my farm gate business. He has, he markets fruits and vegetables right from his farm, the farm gate marketing thing that many farmers do. And he said, oh, traffic by my farm has gone up, my income has gone up. They've been great neighbors. So, yeah, and trust me on that, 10 years earlier, he was not saying that.
Yeah.
But, to give him some credit, I mean, I guess he changed his mind. And I was actually happy to hear him say that, the Sands and the Plating were a good neighbor and his farm was doing better, which is, so some of your most vocal opponents, sometimes, 2 or 3 years later, or in this case, a decade later, go, oh, it's great.
Right.
I mean, I can't explain it. It just, people are strange. Okay, so the last paragraph here isn't really relevant, but I'm going to leave it in because this is a private memo. We're not going to show it to anybody else. But if we were to do it with a more sophisticated commercial realtor, we would say this letter of agreement expresses the wishes of the parties, but is non-binding on either party. So it's not a legal agreement. However, both parties, and this is legal, both parties agreed to make best efforts to complete a binding agreement of purchase sale on substantially the same terms and conditions on or before, the 15th day of March 2024. So we're if we were to actually sign this with the seller, then we would spend the next couple of weeks in negotiating a binding agreement of purchase sale. We make best efforts to do it. And during that time, the last sentence says, during that time, they would not entertain any other offers. So there is some legal component to this, but if you can't reach an agreement for some reason or another, there's no legal remedy here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that's a pretty typical deal points agreement, and it's, I don't know what you think of it, Jeff, but I do think it's pretty useful to do it.
Yeah, so are we saying that next steps is to possibly present this or talk points to the sellers, the seller realtor?
Can you say that again?
I'm just trying to put together next steps.
Okay.
Are we, Scott, are you ready to
Yes.
put it in
Yeah.
on the property?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Bruce,
Yes.
next steps would be obviously, we'll reach out to the realtor, see if we can get any more information on the property.
Yeah, please.
I've dealt with this lady, this realtor before. I believe she's mostly a residential realtor.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, do we just do an agreement of purchase and sale?
Yeah, no, we're not going to do we're not going to do a deal points memo for a residential realtor. Like I said earlier in the call, we give a residential realtor, this deal points memo, she'll have no idea what the hell we're doing.
Correct.
So I think
Correct.
just have to, what I did today was to establish, a process for both of you guys as you go through your career. And what you're going to do, Jeff, is you're going to take the deal points memo and as fast as you can, you're going to put it into an agreement of purchase and sale with all the clauses, et cetera, that I've drafted up.
Yep.
And then send it to me and to Scott. I'll review it. Scott, just so you know, I think Jeff knows, I'm trying not to work in the evenings. I am 72 now. Okay. So, Jeff is only 39.
Well, you're an early riser, Bruce, aren't you?
I am. So
Yeah.
I don't mind reviewing a document at 6 or 7 or 5 a.m. even, but after 4 or 5 in the afternoon, if you've been at it since 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning, that's enough for somebody my age. So one of the reasons why I do less realtor work is A, I like coaching. Frankly, I like it a lot. And B, it's really time for the younger people to do more of the deal making, if you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your help on this, Jeff. I mean it. I just, I don't, as a realtor, Scott, you would know that some realtors are out Saturday night, it's -15. They're at Tim Hortons, it's 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday night, they're trying to make a deal. I don't want to be that guy. I'm too old now.
I get it.
I can do more helping people like this than I
Yeah.
can sitting at Tim Hortons at 9 o'clock on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just sent you guys, I just sent you guys the deal points memo. You put it into agreement to purchase or sale, Jeff, and I will look at it, if it's available in the morning.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can put it all together tonight, Bruce, and probably send it over to you to take a look. And then if we agree everything's good, then send it over to Scott. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And the only thing we really need from, I think, the realtor, is, what the hell is the PIN number and the legal description? Because I don't want to, that's really fundamental. We make the mistake on that. Scott ends up buying the wrong property
Yeah.
and then I get fired.
I'll reach out to her.
Is it, I guess you could see at your end, Jeff, if the property is actually still available.
As far as, let me pull, as far as yeah. I mean, I just was looking at it this afternoon, so it
Okay.
is. I was looking at a couple, well, we'll look at this one, because it does definitely have the laneway. There's a couple other properties, as you probably know, in the area for sale as well.
Yeah, there's like in terms of lots,
Lots, yes.
yeah, there's one right around the corner from that one that just had its residence demolished.
Is that Bramley?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sitting at 349, I think.
Correct. Yeah, it's been on the
And
market.
it's a smaller lot. It's been for sale for a long time too.
Yeah, 285 days.
Yeah.
Lot 66 by 94.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I think this, if you can get the lot for under $300,000, with the kind of development potential that we think it has, Scott, it looks like a pretty good deal.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
So, no, one last thing before I let you guys go, I apologize. So I wanted to show you, Scott, I don't know if you, have done this sort of thing before. Have you done, spreadsheets for new development?
I haven't, no.
What about you, Jeff?
No, I haven't for new development. No.
All right. So, this is a confidential discussion we're having. Here's one of my clients. This happens to be in Ottawa. We just worked on this recently, February 24th, so about 3 or 4 days ago. It's a property in Ottawa. So this is how you typically do an analysis for a new project. The purchase price of the lot is higher than what you're paying, Scott. It's about $490,000. Then there's land transfer tax, there's some legal costs, and so the total cost to acquire this particular property was about $495,000. Then there's some planning work that's going on right now. There's an architectural technologist working on it. There's some engineering. There's construction costs, $250 per square foot above grade, $125 per square foot below grade. There's your subtotal of your construction costs, financing, 10% for 14 months. You need about half of it average over that period of time, so about $70,000 in interest costs. There's some financing fees. There is an existing house, so it has to be demolished, and that costs money. There's quite a big contingency budget of 9% because everything that can go wrong in construction does go wrong. Remember I talked about development charges? For apartments, it's over 25,000, might be 30,000 a door. Building permit is less expensive. So the total cost for this particular project, and I think it's 6 units, if I remember, yeah, I think it is 6 units, was about $281,000 per door, all in, just under $300 a square foot. That's probably about right.
Okay.
Okay, and then here was the income for the above grade apartments, the below grade apartments, the total per month, the total per year, the operating expenses on a new building. On an old building, OPEX would be probably around 34%. On a new building, probably about 28%. So that's OPEX. Gives you a net operating income of about 112 or 113,000. You divide that by the cost of building this thing, you get a cap rate of about 6.7%. All right. Now, my target, given that interest rates have gone up, my target 2 years ago was if you got a cap rate of 6%, that was pretty good. But my target today is 8% because interest rates are so much higher. So this was just a little bit below. And then what we did was we did another case study where he had exactly the same design, except one of the bedrooms was turned into a micro suite. So it could be rented separately. And I won't go through all the details. That pushed the cap rate up to about 8%. Sorry, 7.9%. So very close to the goal. So that's why you do these spreadsheets, so you get some idea of what the ROI looks like. And, you know, if you can get 7 or 8% on a new build, and hopefully one day in the not too distant future, interest rates will come down from, you know, 7, 8% back down to 4 maybe, or 5. Obviously a 7 or 8% cap rate will look pretty good.
Right.
All right. So we're not going, I'll share those spreadsheets with you, but you guys got to promise me, you know, cross your heart, point to heaven, that you won't share them with anybody else. All right. It's confidential. We share work broadly across the group that I coach, but we don't, you know, we don't put it on Twitter or something.
Right.
All right. Or they call it X now, I think. So, all right. So Scott, you and I, and probably Jeff too, we'll actually do a spreadsheet like that for your development once we figure out what the hell it is. All right. I'll see you guys soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.